So, a few words on today's budget. Now, before getting to the measures themselves, it's important we know the background to it. And I'd say three things on that. First, we're still in the shadow of this massive fiscal blowout, which was the pandemic. The deficit got up to over 300 billion to March 21. That is huge. And they've narrowed that to about 100 billion, but it's still there, it's still big. Second point I'd make is that current expenditure is actually covered by tax revenue. That's not really the problem. In fact, tax revenue exceeds it. The problem is that there is a need for capital investment, and that's where most of the deficit occurs. We need to spend money on infrastructure and investment and other things, and that is not presently funded by tax. So the government will need to narrow that deficit, and it will do so by increasing tax and putting pressure on departmental budgets as standard. So let's go through the actual measures in the budget. The first thing is the minimum wage increase. I think that's very sensible. I'd support that. Secondly, the increase in employers' national insurance. That is slightly more problematic. That is certainly a tax on jobs. It will affect the small business sector. And if you look at the detail, in certain areas, for instance, the care sector, it will hit people very, very hard. If you're a part-time worker and you're on the minimum wage, if you get your calculator out, the increase in NI, employers' NI on that could be 40%. So I'm not sure they've thought that through, actually. The increase to capital gains tax was well trailed. They rolled the pitch on that, not unexpected. The proposal to put pensions under the inheritance tax regime is probably positive. They certainly have enabled people to do some planning on that because it won't be introduced until 2027. But as a broad move, it's probably the right thing. But then we get into more difficult areas. VAT on independent schools has been very controversial. I doubt whether that will actually raise any revenue, net revenue at all, when you've netted out the cost of some schools going bust and pupils transferring to the state sector. Probably a very foolish move. The increase of the bus fare cap from £2 to £3, again, I think is very foolish. That will not oil the works of the economies in the towns and cities throughout this country, particularly on travel to work. I can understand the government acting on non-dom tax status, but I'm very concerned that the broader effects of that might be harmful. We'll have to wait and see. I think there were missed opportunities on tax, which the SDP would support. Things like a tax on planning gain on greenfield development. That could have raised something like 8 billion. You could build a lot of homes for that. And a turnover tax, unmentioned. A turnover tax on multinationals that dodge tax, basically, by booking profits in tax havens abroad. Nothing on that. That's a missed opportunity. If you look at the spending commitments, 300 million extra for universities, I think that would be better spent on skills training. The big item, I think, in today's budget on housing, again, is not very impressive if you actually look at the figures. 5 billion is enough to build about 25,000 homes. Again, not enough. And as a capital item, it's dwarfed by the revenue costs of housing benefit, which stand at over 30 billion a year. The 20 billion pounds for the NHS, that's welcome. It should go into capital investment and equipment to improve treatment. That's very welcome. Interesting in the Chancellor's statement, unless I missed it, unmentioned nuclear power, not mentioned at all. No programme for that. A lot of stuff on net zero, but nothing on nuclear power. And no mention of the trade balance, which I think, again, was disappointing. So, to sum up, I think the difficulties we find ourselves in were not made in a day. This is the product of decades of underinvestment. The old equation, I think, works, which is savings equals investment, and investment equals future prosperity. So the government will have to attend to some very serious things: how to reindustrialise, how to increase and improve the tax base, and how to deal with our energy crisis. Again, we don't have a plan for baseload. It's all right talking about windmills, no baseload proposals, really, not good enough. So finally, the other thing that I think the government will have to attend to very carefully, you can raise tax, but you've got to perform. And a major issue is public sector productivity. And if that remains low, then a lot of the additional tax will not result in anything better for the general public. So to sum up, I think on all of these important matters, I think the path forward is still unclear. But if you want a better alternative, check us out at the SDP. Thank you.